This is the story of one of the greatest fighters in MMA history, who also became one of its most controversial figures. This is what happened when unmatched dominance collided with suspensions, legal trouble, and constant chaos. Jonathan Bones Jones entered MMA in 2008 and made an immediate impact. He won his debut by TKO in just 92 seconds and quickly built a 7-0 record before joining the UFC. From the beginning, Jones stood out. At 6'4", with an 8'4" reach, he combined wrestling, striking, and unorthodox techniques that most fighters simply couldn't deal with. That rise reached its peak on the 19th of March 2011. At just 23 years old, Jones defeated Mauricio Shogun Rua to become the youngest UFC champion in history. From there, he didn't just defend the title, he dominated an entire generation. He defeated elite names like Lyoto Machida, Rashad Evans, Quinton Rampage Jackson, and Alexander Gustafsson. He went on to set records. Most consecutive light heavyweight title defenses with 14 total UFC title fight wins by 2020. By this point, many were already calling him the greatest fighter in MMA history, but while his success inside the cage was historic, problems outside of it had already begun. Even during his championship run, controversies started to follow him. In 2012, Jones crashed his Bentley into a pole after a night out. 2 passengers were injured. He refused a sobriety test and later received a fine and license suspension. That same period also saw smaller incidents, including driving violations and public criticism for pulling out of a fight that led to the cancellation of UFC 151, the first cancelled pay-per-view in UFC history. Despite this, his dominance continued. In 2013, he defeated Alexander Gustafsson in what became one of the greatest fights in UFC history. And in 2015, he defeated Daniel Cormier, further cementing his legacy. At this point, Jones was not just winning, he was building one of the most impressive resumes in combat sports. But everything changed just months later. In April 2015, Jon Jones was involved in a hit-and-run incident in Albuquerque. He ran a red light, crashed into another vehicle, and fled the scene. The other driver, a pregnant woman, was injured. Marijuana was later found in his car. The consequences were immediate. The UFC stripped him of his title and suspended him indefinitely. Jones later pleaded guilty to leaving the scene of an accident and avoided prison, receiving probation instead. This marked the first time his career truly collapsed. For the first time, the conversation shifted from, "Is he the greatest ever?" to, "Can he stay out of trouble long enough to fight?" When Jones returned, the problems didn't stop, they escalated. In 2016, he tested positive for banned substances ahead of UFC 200. The result, a 1-year suspension. Jones denied cheating, stating, "I've been so outspoken about being against any type of performance enhancers. Being labeled as someone who would cheat hurts more than anything I've ever been through." But the damage was already done. Then came 2017. Jones returned and defeated Daniel Cormier by knockout, one of the biggest wins of his career. But shortly after, he tested positive again. The result, fight overturned to a no contest. Title stripped again. $205. Fine. 1 5-month suspension. This was now a pattern. Even Dana White said, "Jones is the greatest talent ever and the biggest screw-up ever." At this point, Jones had been stripped of the title twice. His talent was undeniable, but so was the chaos. Despite everything, Jones returned once more. In December 2018, he regained the light heavyweight title by defeating Alexander Gustafsson. He defended it successfully in 2019 against Anthony Smith. And in 2020, he defeated Dominic Reyes in a split decision to retain the belt, his record 14th title fight win. But even here, controversy followed. He missed weight for that fight and forfeited a portion of his purse. Shortly after, Jones vacated the title to move up to heavyweight. It looked like a fresh start, but once again, the issues continued. In March 2020, Jones was arrested for DWI in New Mexico after failing a field sobriety test. He later pleaded to a lesser charge and received 4 days house arrest, 1-year probation, community service, and treatment. Then, in September 2021, he was arrested again in Las Vegas on domestic battery and property damage charges. This happened the same weekend he was inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame. Although those charges were later dropped, the pattern was clear. Jones's career wasn't just about fighting anymore, it was constantly interrupted by legal chaos. Jones eventually moved up to heavyweight, rebuilding his body to around 255 pounds. In 2023, he faced Cyril Gane. But once again, controversy followed. After the fight, he tested positive for a substance, and the result was later overturned to a no contest with a suspension and fine. Later that year, he fought Alex Pariah and was knocked out in the first round, one of the most surprising losses of his career. For a fighter who had dominated for over a decade, this raised new questions. Was this the beginning of the end? Throughout his career, Jones earned significant money, but not without disputes. Reported fight purses reached around $500,000 per fight, with additional bonuses and pay-per-view shares. His total career earnings are estimated in the tens of millions. But in recent years, Jones has publicly clashed with the UFC over pay. In 2026, he stated he felt lowballed in negotiations, and even suggested he could walk away if terms weren't met. At this stage, the battle wasn't just inside the cage, it was also about business. Jon Jones's legacy is one of the most debated in sports. On one side, record-breaking champion, dominated elite competition, widely considered one of the greatest fighters ever. On the other, multiple failed drug tests, legal incidents across multiple years, stripped of titles 3 separate times. Few athletes in any sport have had this level of dominance and this level of controversy at the same time. As of 2026, Jones remains under UFC contract but has not fought since 2023. He has expressed uncertainty about retirement, saying, "I'm not sure if I'm retired or not. I don't feel like I have anything to prove." At the same time, he has hinted at renewed motivation and possible future fights. So, the story isn't fully over yet. Jon Jones's career is one of the most complicated stories in sports. He became the youngest champion in UFC history, set records that may never be broken, and proved himself against the best fighters of his era. But alongside that greatness came suspensions, legal trouble, and repeated setbacks. This is what makes his story unique. Not just dominance, not just controversy, but a career defined by both at the same time. And as of now, the final chapter still hasn't been written.